There are moments in baseball that stop time. Not metaphorically. Not in the way that sports commentary reaches for dramatic language to describe things that are merely exciting or impressive or worth remembering. But literally, moments where the entire ecosystem of a baseball game, the constant motion and noise and activity that fills every second of 9 innings, comes to a complete and sudden stop. Everyone freezes. The players on the field. The coaches in the dugout. The broadcasters in the booth who have spent careers developing the instinct to fill silence with words and find themselves, in this particular moment, unable to find any words at all. And in the stands, thousands of people who came to watch a baseball game and are now watching something entirely different. Something that has nothing to do with wins or losses or standings or statistics. Something that belongs to a category of human experience that sport occasionally, unexpectedly, produces, and that reminds everyone present why they fell in love with this game in the first place. Miguel Rojas reached 1,000 hits. And what happened immediately after that moment, what Rojas did, how he reacted, the actions that sent a shockwave of pure emotion through an entire stadium and then through every screen and platform and corner of the baseball world that saw what happened next, was not something anyone predicted. Not the media. Not the fans. Not his teammates. Not even, it seems, Rojas himself. He broke down. Completely. Publicly. In the full view of everyone watching, with the cameras that never look away and the microphones that catch everything and the replays that will preserve this moment permanently, Miguel Rojas broke down in a way that made hardened baseball veterans turn away to compose themselves and made strangers in the stands reach for each other without knowing why. And at the center of it, because he is always at the center of the moments that matter most in this organization right now, was Shohei Ohtani. What Ohtani did in that moment. What he said. The specific, quiet, deeply human action he took when his teammate needed something that no statistic and no milestone and no media coverage could provide, is the part of this story that the US media is still trying to fully process. Stay with us. Because what happened between Rojas and Ohtani in the aftermath of hit number 1000 is a story about baseball the way the best baseball stories always are, which is to say, it is not really about baseball at all. To understand why 1000 hits carried the weight it did for Miguel Rojas, why this number produced a reaction that went far beyond the professional satisfaction of a career achievement, you have to understand who Miguel Rojas is and what the journey to this number actually cost him. Rojas is not a player whose career has unfolded along the smooth, ascending trajectory that the most celebrated players in baseball tend to follow. He did not arrive in the major leagues surrounded by the noise of enormous expectations and the infrastructure of organizations that invest heavily in the development of sure things. His path was quieter. Harder. Built through the accumulation of small proofs, performances that demonstrated value without generating headlines, contributions that showed up in the ways that win baseball games but rarely show up in the conversations that define how players are remembered. He is a defender first. A shortstop whose value to the teams he has played for has always been rooted in the things that happen away from the batter's box, the range, the arm, the baseball intelligence that allows him to be in the right position before the ball is hit, the leadership that veteran players provide simply by carrying themselves in ways that younger players observe and absorb without being explicitly taught. But he hits. He has always hit. Not with the power that produces the moments that make highlight reels, not with the frequency that puts him in conversations about the sport's elite offensive players. With the consistency of someone who has learned, through years of professional competition, exactly what he is capable of and exactly how to be that thing every single day. 1,000 times, over the course of a career built on reliability and professionalism and the quiet dignity of a player who never needed to be the most celebrated person in the room to understand his own value, he has reached base with a hit. 1,000. The number arrived on a specific pitch, in a specific at-bat, in a game that had been proceeding the way games proceed, with the normal rhythms of competition and strategy and the accumulated tension of innings adding up toward a conclusion. And then the ball found a gap. And Rojas ran. And somewhere in the running, somewhere between the swing and the base, the full weight of what had just happened reached him. The hit itself was not extraordinary in its physical dimensions. It was not a home run that cleared a fence dramatically, not a walk-off that ended a game in a moment of pure theatrical timing, not the kind of hit that produces an immediate, obvious reaction from the crowd because the crowd recognizes what has happened before the player does. It was a base hit. Clean. Well struck. The product of a professional at-bat by a professional hitter who has spent years refining the approach that produces exactly this kind of contact. But as Rojas reached first base and the play was completed and the inning continued with the normal flow of baseball, the first base coach said something to him. And Rojas stopped. Not physically. Not in a way that interrupted the game or drew immediate attention from everyone in the stadium. But internally. There was a visible shift, a change in the quality of his presence at first base that the cameras caught and that replays have since made available to anyone who wants to understand exactly when the moment arrived for him. He knew. 1,000. The number that had been approaching for weeks, visible in the statistics that track such things, discussed in the media coverage that follows players with the patience to wait for milestones, had arrived. Here. In this game. On this hit. He stood at first base for a moment that lasted longer than first base moments usually last. His head dropped slightly. His shoulders moved in a way that anyone who has ever tried to contain a large emotion in a public space will recognize immediately. He was fighting it. For a moment, he almost won that fight. And then his teammates came out of the dugout. And the crowd understood what was happening. And the noise of the stadium shifted, from the baseline competitive noise of a baseball game to something warmer, something more personal, something that the crowd produced not because they were cheering for a run or a win but because they were recognizing a human being in a moment of genuine significance. And Rojas stopped fighting. What happened next is the part that the U.S. media has been unable to stop discussing. Because Rojas did not simply tear up briefly and compose himself with the practiced emotional management that professional athletes typically deploy in public moments. He did not produce the controlled, photogenic display of feeling that sports has learned to accommodate, the single tear, the deep breath, the quick return to competitive focus. He broke down. Genuinely. Completely. In the full view of everyone watching, his teammates surrounding him, his coaches emerging from the dugout, the crowd on its feet, the cameras capturing every angle of a man being temporarily overwhelmed by something too large to contain. The thing that overwhelmed him was not just the number. Numbers, by themselves, do not produce this kind of reaction in professional athletes who have spent careers developing the psychological tools to manage the emotional weight of their profession. What overwhelmed him was memory. In the seconds after the milestone was confirmed, in the space between the first base coach's words and the arrival of his teammates, Rojas later described going somewhere entirely different from the baseball field he was standing on. To the beginning. To the places and people and moments that exist at the origin of a career, the early struggles, the doubts, the seasons where the gap between where he was and where he needed to be felt impossible to close, the people who believed in him during those seasons when belief required something more than evidence. Those memories arrived all at once. And 1,000 hits became something that had nothing to do with baseball. It became proof. Proof that the journey was real. That the work was real. That the people who believed in him were right to believe. That the version of himself he had always carried in his most private moments of professional ambition, the version capable of reaching this number, of sustaining this career, of being here on this field in this moment, had always been real too. The breakdown was not weakness. It was the opposite. It was a man being fully present for the arrival of something he had worked his entire professional life to reach. Here is the part that has moved people most deeply. As Rojas stood at first base being surrounded by congratulating teammates, as the organized chaos of a milestone celebration unfolded with everyone wanting to be part of the moment, Ohtani moved differently than everyone else. He did not rush. He did not arrive as part of the group, swept forward by the collective momentum of a team celebrating a teammate's achievement. He waited. Watched. Let the initial wave of celebration reach Rojas before he approached. And when he approached, he did not do what most players do in milestone celebrations. The backslapping, the handshakes, the shouted congratulations that are sincere but also somewhat performative, shaped by the awareness of cameras and crowds and the understood grammar of how public celebrations are supposed to look. He put his hand on Rojas's shoulder. Quietly. Firmly. The hand of someone who understood that what was happening for Rojas in that moment was not primarily a celebration. That beneath the smiles and the tears and the crowd noise, something deeply personal was occurring that required not amplification but acknowledgement. He leaned close and said something. The cameras could not capture the words. The microphones that catch so much in a baseball stadium did not catch these. They existed only between Ohtani and Rojas, in the private space that two people can create even in the middle of a crowded, noisy stadium when one of them has something genuinely important to say to the other. But Rojas's reaction to those words told the story that the words themselves could not be heard to tell. He exhaled. Deeply. The kind of exhale that happens when something tightly held is finally released. His eyes closed briefly. When they opened, the quality of his emotion had shifted, not diminished, but settled. As though whatever Ohtani had said had given him permission to feel what he was feeling without being consumed by it. The U.S. media, watching this exchange on replay, has struggled to find adequate language for what they witnessed. In the hours after the game, the clip moved through the baseball world with a speed that pure statistics never achieve. Not just through the baseball community, through the broader sporting public, through the spaces where people who don't follow baseball closely still pay attention when something genuinely human breaks through the noise of professional sport and reaches them directly. The reason it spread so widely is not complicated.